is Walter O'Brien, and I'm a genius. Walter! Einstein had an IQ of 165. Mine's 197.
Sign them, and I'll tell you how I hacked into NASA.
Corporal to command. We have Scorpion. He's just a kid.
When I was a kid, it got me into a little trouble. Now that I'm an adult, nothing's changed.
Bombs went off in Boston, just yards from the marathon finish line. But how did the agency so quickly process all that video? Meet Walter O'Brien.
In Boston case, you'd have almost 4,000 hours of footage. You can't watch it all fast enough.
The benevolent genius behind Scorpion Computer Services.
Well, thank you, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I appreciate you having me. And thanks to Ken for that amazing earlier speech that hopefully means you'll actually be able to follow mine, because he explained the whole EQ, IQ thing far better than I could have. And I've known Ken a long time, so the fact that he says I've improved a bit over the last 10 years is encouraging to hear. Usually it's right after they declare I'm a genius, I end up having technical problems, so I'm glad this is working. Or I forget where I parked, which is pretty embarrassing. But not as embarrassing as the facelift I apparently got in the drawing up here. I can't imagine which photo that was based off of. All right, so I'm going to run through a lot of stuff really quick. I got 20 minutes to tell you a 30-year story. So bear with me, and I'll be around for the rest of the day if anyone has questions. But the only way I know how to describe how I ended up where I'm at is to tell you what I went through in the story. A couple of takeaways from it. One of them is, as I went through life, it didn't bother me that I was different. It didn't bother me that nobody agreed with me. And I ended up having a few different epiphanies along the way that I went with, and it changed my business. So one of the things I will tout is that most people are wrong most of the time. If you make 400 grand in America, you're in the top 1%. As Ken said, if you run your own business, you're in the top 5%. So people end up listening to the other 95%. And that's like me listening to, someone bigger than me on weight loss advice, or someone with less than me on financial advice. It makes no sense unless their track record is better than yours. So be careful who you listen to. So let me take you through this story, and hopefully it'll all make sense by the end of it. So born in Ireland, dairy farmer's son, didn't fit in at home, didn't fit in at school, wasn't sure why. I was just the weird kid who took apart the TV when no one was home. Got in a little trouble, hacked NASA at 13, stole the space shuttle, blueprints, Bank of England by 16, cracked Swift that they use for bank wires. Both became my customers later, was a national coding champion, an Olympic coding champion, and got degrees in computer science and artificial intelligence. Ended up starting a company at 13 using my hacker name, and got transferred to the US on an EB-11 visa, kind of like the Nobel Prize winning visa for of national interest to the economy. That allowed me then to, when I started my company, I hired the only people I trusted. And I was bullied heavily in school, so the only people I trusted were the other geeks that I protected. And as soon as I put two of them on the same project, and they tried to kill each other while insulting the customer, I thought maybe I have a problem here. And look, this was a very negative thing at the time, very positive thing looking back at it, which a lot of things will end up that way. At the time, I'm like, oh my God, my company's going to fall apart. These people can't work together and can't work as a team. EQ, emotional quotient, common sense, social skills, street smarts, bedside manner, whatever you want to call it, I was out that day at kindergarten when they handed it out. I am entirely left brain dominant, no right brain side of it, which makes it very hard for me to put myself in other people's shoes or see things from someone else's point of view. Steve Jobs said, point of view is worth 20 IQ points. A big part of his success is he knew what the user wanted before the user knew what they wanted. And he refused to take no for an answer. If he had, the iPad never would have been invented. It didn't make shareholder sense, but it made sense to him. The best example of a story that relates to this in my world, and it's always fun when I tell it because half the audience will laugh at the first part and half the audience will laugh at the second part. So the guy's in a hot air balloon. He floats down to a guy on a bicycle in Seattle going to work. And he yells out to him and says, "Hey, where am I?" Guy gets off the bicycle, looks at him really carefully, says to him, "You're about 50 feet up in a hot air balloon." The guy in the balloon's a little perturbed, and he says, "You must be an engineer." The guy on the ground's like, "That's amazing. How did you know?" He said, "Well, your answer is technically correct, but completely useless." The engineer responds and said, "You must be in executive management." And the guy goes, "How do you know?" "Well, you're floating around the clouds with no idea where you're going, but now it's my fault." And that's a little bit of the IQ versus the EQ. So what we did is we went out and I hired people with high EQ. Some single moms, elementary school teachers, psychologists, usually with PMP certifications. And we called them the super nannies because they babysit the geniuses and the customers. Now I had IQ and EQ. I had fused together the best communicators with the best thinkers. So now I had a little think tank that could solve problems. All I had to do now was stop them quitting. So again, as an engineer, I just reverse engineered quitting. Why do smart people quit their jobs? Number one reason, their boss is an idiot. Okay, I'll have you report to someone with a higher IQ and a higher EQ. You may not like your boss, but they're not an idiot. Number two, they get bored. So we put them on at least 3 projects at the same time. They're completely unrelated. The context switching is good for the brain. You get about 20% more productivity out of that, and they don't get bored. Stability. I think the average time for an executive being laid off in the US now is about 2.5 years through no fault of their own. With my model, you might lose 1 of your 3 projects, so it's a 33% layoff for a month or 2, and then you pick up another one. A lot more stability. Next thing, more important than money, is fairness. So we quantified fairness and created a Judge Judy type court system. So if you worked on a project with us with 2 other people and they didn't pull their weight and you did half the work, then I've been minus 16% unfair to you and plus 8% extra fair to the other people. So those are your raises and demerits for the same 1,000 hours on the next project. Therefore, I'm load balancing your fairness through 0 over time. So you can't build up begrudgery points. And finally, your super nanny helps round you out with EQ, and that improves your relationships with your parents and your family and your spouse, et cetera, et cetera. Little EQ goes a long way. So we went from solving little problems like Geek Squad at Best Buy would do to solving problems with some of the biggest companies in the world, supply chain management systems, anti-fraud, credit card systems, and then we ended up doing a lot of military stuff. And this is for some companies you know, from our ballistic missile defense for the US to our command and control systems, nuclear submarines, serious stuff where either people die or you lose millions of dollars per hour if it goes wrong. So our pessimism and super paranoia about thinking about every little thing that can go wrong was actually our value. Where the rest of the world is all worried about being positive and optimistic, we're being paid to be pessimistic. And I have a friend who's even more pessimistic than me, and I said to him, "How can you live your life like this?" And he said, "Because I only like pleasant surprises." Think about it. So we end up with a few wealthy families and a few royal families and some of the largest funds and infrastructures in the world, again, because they all cared. They all couldn't afford a large amount of downtime. So then what's my next act from there? Where do I go from here now that I've got that kind of figured out a little bit? Well, I was a busy guy, so I looked at my life, and I'd encourage you guys to do the same with yourselves right now. Think of your to-do list and all the things you got to get done. And picture it like this triangle. At the top, we have a green section. That's your core competency. There's something each of you are better at than I'll ever be. Stick with that. That's your magic. There's stuff at the bottom, the yellow triangle. That is well-defined tasks you can give to a secretary and an assistant. But there's a big blue triangle in the middle, and that is an area where you have ideas, concepts, you don't know what they cost, you don't know if they're feasible, you don't know if someone else has done them, you don't know anything about them, you just have this idea and you haven't had time to look into it. Now we're all used to outsourcing things downwards, that yellow part at the bottom, but what if you could outsource things upwards or sideways to someone with just as much common sense as you and just as good a Rolodex? What that would mean is you could now buy time. You could buy 8 hours on Monday to work on something you don't have time to work on Monday. And we call this concierge up, because normally you'd concierge down things that are too simple to do yourself. So a way to think about it is, if you want to search something, type it in Google. If you want it to happen, type it in here. Examples of that. I know this is a tiny font, but this is all custom for you guys. So maybe you have a new idea. You're going to need to do market and research. Maybe you're writing a book. You need prototyping, business plans, a website, a pro forma, a pitch, a video. Maybe you need money to go get money, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot of homework. But you don't have to do all of it yourself. You just have to orchestrate it all yourself. And maybe the core of the idea is your core competency, and everything else isn't. Maybe you're not a spreadsheet whiz, and someone else should write your pro forma. Maybe you already have a business or you inherited one from your parents. You need new ideas, you need a competitive edge, you need better business process efficiency, PR campaigns, better security, growth strategy, new buildings, etc. Again, ton of homework. For some reason, you've convinced yourself that you have to do it yourself because it's just you and maybe your assistant. There's a whole bunch of people in between who can help. You're doing a startup. My CTO just quit and took all his passwords with him in a big fight. Hack back into my company, lock him out, change the passwords, hire and train up a new CTO, and make the whole thing like it never happened. In one phone call. That's like calling Ghostbusters. Divorced my business partners after 20 years. Split the company in two and created 2 more companies. Split everything down to the fax number, and we got our own businesses to run, so just handle it. Personal things. My daughter has anorexia. Find all food that's odorless and tasteless but high in calories and fat. My son fell in love with a Ukrainian gold digger. Break him up before the wedding, but don't let him know we interfered. My mom has throat cancer. Research all non-FDA approved solutions outside the US. Or I'm worried about the economy turn down and where things are going to go in Trump land, so I want to build a bug-out bag for my whole family. How do I get 30 people out of LA when the FAA shut down the airlines, rioting starts, the dollar's not worth much, and the 3% that's actually your liquid money at the bank is exhausted? Then where do you go? And that place you're going, does that have 100 grand in cash in a concrete safe under the floor so that you can survive the next 4 months or years? My daughter got kidnapped and put in a prison in Libya. So we arranged a military forced extraction to get her back in 48 hours. Can we choose a winning racehorse based on its DNA and other factors by looking at statistical regression on 7 years of winners and 7 years of losers, and then see what all the winners had in common? Lung capacity, heart capacity, adrenaline storage. Weigh their food before and after you give it to them so you know they're losing their appetite. What often happens is when we apply engineering type thinking to an industry that has never had it applied, we have our best wins. We have our 300% improvements. Because I can't make it worse by applying technology. Make a documentary for my favorite charity so they can raise more money. Now, this is one of these epiphanies. It took me a long time to realize. I mean, what the heck is a technical guy doing solving these kind of problems? Well, the epiphany was, what I'm classically trained to do, like every programmer, is turn ambiguity into absolute. Take a bunch of fuzzy requirements and force them into ones and zeros. And that's an interesting skill where you can go from hacking systems to hacking lives. We could plan your wedding and your divorce that way. And do a reverse mortgage on your alimony. So, the more fuzzy you are, which might be, I just want to be happy, or I just want to be stable, or whatever it is, the more freedom there is to help you. I'm not necessarily pitching us here. What I'm saying to you is think this way. Start breaking your life into the triangle, break everything out as a project, and go, why do I need to do this? Does it make sense to give this to someone else? Instead of assuming you got to do everything, because that just slows you down. Happiness, help me retire from my company or sell my company. So these are all kinds of requests that we get in conciergeup.com all the time. And it's a tremendous fun. I get to sit there like Santa Claus reading people's 3 wishes and figuring out which ones we make come true. So then I had a problem. Too many requests coming in, not enough geniuses. We had 2,500 in the consortium, above 150 IQ. They're not easy to find. They're 1 in 10,000 on the planet. So I went to my guys and said, now I have a funded problem. How do I find more of you guys? So they took the same approach they always do to software. We assume the customer's always wrong. Then we question the assumptions. Then we gather the requirements, etc. And they did research. And they said, if you write a book, the millennials won't read it. If you make a movie, they'll forget your name in 6 months. If you replace CSI as the #1 show on the air for the next 10 years, they will come find you. And the 12-year-olds will grow up wanting to be you instead of wanting to be Kim Kardashian. And you will make math cool. So we got the producers of Transformers, Spider-Man, Star Trek, director of Fast and the Furious, the writers of Sopranos, Prison Break, Hostages. Put them all together under CBS. And we're now just approved for season 3 of the #1 show on the air, licensed in 100 countries, 26 million viewers a week on the pilot. Handsome guy in the middle plays me at like 20. And, because, yeah, I really did look like that. But the show is about a dysfunctional family of geniuses with low EQ that met a single mom with high EQ, Catherine McPhee, who's beginning to teach them how to communicate normally with the world. And she has a 10-year-old son she thought was autistic, who suddenly comes alive around these geniuses, and it turns out he's just a genius too. Sound familiar? So this worked. 105,000 people hit our website as soon as the show aired. We get up to 20 resumes for geniuses every week. We get a ton of requests to lease out our Rent-A-Brain by the hour, our Rent-A-Brain vending machine, and try and help people out. And it's tremendously satisfying, whether it takes 3 years or 3 hours to solve someone's problem when they couldn't have solved it themselves, or they would have taken them way longer. So it's efficiency, and I like efficiency, being a little OCD myself. The 3 messages of the show, there's a place for everyone who never fit in. So I grew up not fitting in. I built a place where I fit in, a home for the mentally enabled, an orphanage for smart people. Makes me Professor X with hair. Every problem has a solution, and being smart is cool rather than being good at basketball is cool. That for 8 years might just save this country from having to learn Chinese. Some of the feedback. So my challenge to you folks is take some of this lessons learned from all of this. A lot of this is common sense. A lot of this is EQ. A little bit is genius. But do it to yourself. Concierge up yourself. Break down your to-do list. Throw away the half of it you're never going to do. And give the other half to someone else. And believe me, there'll always be plenty to manage. But get this thing moving. Don't take 5 years to write your book. Take 5 months. Get things moving forward. So thank you very much. Thank you.